You're watching JCT TV. This is Bible study for the 21st century. Welcome, friends. Jim Cantelon here. Great to be with you. We are in the midst of the Passion of Jesus, the account of his arrest, his crucifixion, his resurrection, his ascension. It's not quite Easter yet in terms of our calendar year, but that's where we are right now in Matthew. And boy, is it gripping reading. And I'm taking my time with it, and I hope you're enjoying it. And we'll get right into it right after this short break.
WOW! Working for Orphans and Widows is a trusted Christian charity reaching out to the sick and the dying, the least of these in pandemic-stricken Africa and India. For over 22 years, Jim and Kathy Cantelon have engaged with community-based champions and church volunteers in the care for those whom Jim calls society's weakest link. Everything from home-based palliative care to the rescue and protection of young women and girls who are victims of abuse is done in the name of Jesus and is overseen by local partner champions and an army of church-based volunteers. WOW has a proven track record. Check it out on wowmission.com, or if you wish, you can call or write to us. Its sustainability is dependent on the support of faithful friends like you.
So friends, last time we were with Pilate, who was flummoxed, distressed, confused, mad, angry at this early morning interruption with this rabble, of people, and then the official religious leaders heading them up, flinging Jesus before him, saying, this guy says he's the king of the Jews, and any king is a threat to Rome, and you need to get rid of him. I mean, basically they were passing the buck. They wanted Jesus dead, but they couldn't kill him. But Pilate could, because he was the authority. He was the representative of the occupying Roman army, and he could do this. And as the Romans were doing all of the time with zealots and insurrectionists and rebels. So we spent some time with this last program. And if you missed last program on television, you can always go onto it, on the internet or YouTube. It's Roku. We're ubiquitous, like most productions are these days. But it really is pretty gripping reading. But now Pilate is having to make some kind of decision. Looks like he's made it. He's decided, well, the least I can do is, beat the guy. So, verse 27 of Matthew 27. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium, gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Then twisted together a crown of thorns, set it on his head, put a staff in his right hand. Then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spit on him, took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they had mocked him, they took off the robe, put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a man from Cyrene named Simon, and they forced him to carry the cross. They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull, and there they offered Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall, but after tasting it, he refused to drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. Above his head, they placed the written charge against him. "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 rebels were crucified with him, one on his right, one on his left. And those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads, saying, You who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. Come down from the cross if you're the Son of God. In the same way, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders mocked him. He saved himself. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God rescue him now if he wants him, for he said, I am the Son of God. In the same way, the rebels who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. From noon until 3 p.m, darkness came over all the land. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, or Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of those standing there heard this, they said, he's calling Elijah. Immediately one of them ran and got a sponge. He filled it with wine vinegar, put on a staff and offered it to Jesus to drink. The rest said, leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to save him. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, the tombs broke open. The bodies of many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection, went into the holy city, and appeared to many people. When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and all that had happened, they were terrified and exclaimed, surely he was the Son of God. Many women were there, watching from a distance. They'd followed Jesus from Galilee to care for his needs. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. Whoa. So the short-term answer for Pilate was to crucify him. But, first we'll let the soldiers have their fun. And the transfigured Son of God, the healer of thousands, the greatest preacher-teacher of all time, the Holy One of Israel, allowed these orc-like brutes to scourge and mock him. The blood of the covenant began to spill on Antonio's pavement stones. The scarlet robe and the crown of thorns, bearing witness to humankind's rejection of the Lamb of God. Indeed, Isaiah, got it right centuries before it when he prophesied, and I quote him here, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he didn't open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. Then they took him to Calvary. Now, crucifixion was the act of execution by nailing and or binding a criminal victim, a criminal/victim, to a pole or to a tree set in the ground. Sometimes it was an actual living tree that they would use. Rome adopted crucifixion from the Phoenicians, and the Persians, who executed slaves and aliens in this barbarous manner. And in Palestine, Rome used this method against thieves, insurgents, and seditionists. And it provided a powerful public spectacle, an effective way to flex its muscles with the Judean rabble and set an example. You mess around as an insurgent, and this was going to happen to you. It made the point. Essentially, it was death by torture. The condemned man was scourged, his back shredded to bloody ribbons. He was stripped, shaming by public nudity. He was laid on the ground, where he was nailed to the crossbeams, ropes securing his upper arms, his legs bent, then nailed to the pole or the tree and slammed down into the hole if it was a pole. Thirst, blood loss, exposure, shame, cramped circulation, slow suffocation as the weight of a suspended body, restricted breathing. This all provided a perfect storm of suffering. Sometimes the legs had to be broken because they were providing too much support. They wanted to hasten suffocation. And nevertheless, it usually took hours to die. The Jewish historian Josephus, in the Jewish War, says there were so many crucifixions during the siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD, this is a few years after Jesus, that there was little room left for crosses or crosses for bodies. It was used for decades as a means of getting rid of opponents of the nation of Rome. Already weakened by blood loss from his scourging, Jesus was forced to carry the horizontal crossbeam, or it was called the patibulum, to Calvary. He was collapsing under its weight, so the soldiers impressed a bystander by the name of Simon of Cyrene, which would be modern-day Libya, to carry it for him. And the entire Via Dolorosa was lined with a mocking, spitting throng. These were the same people who only days earlier had proclaimed Hosanna as Jesus made his triumphal entry. It's amazing how plaudits can become taunts so quickly. Golgotha, which means skull or head in Aramaic, was a hill outside the city wall. It probably was a rock quarry, the site of stoning, lots of ammunition, crucifixions, and it was on a roadway. It was accessible to the public. So the crosses hung the victims at eye level. They weren't way up on a hill. They were at eye level. You could walk right up and look a crucified victim in the eye. You could abuse him. You could spit on him. You could even hit him if you wanted to. They were right there, okay? Their feet are nailed just inches above the ground. So you could gawk, you could taunt, you could spit, you could do whatever you wanted to do. An irresistible magnet for mean-spirited people, an ideal spot for venting. It was a Roman custom to hang a placard to show what the person had been crucified for. In this case, this is Jesus, the King of the Jews. Now, this was pretty subtle on Pilate's part, King of the Jews, because it was both a direct insult to the Jewish leadership, King of the Jews. They didn't want that up there. He's not our king, King of the Jews. And it was also a warning against would-be insurgents, to anybody who wanted to rise up against the nation of Rome. You want to be the leader. Well, this is what happens to leaders. So Pilate got it both ways. He put his thumb in the eye of the religious leaders, and he put his thumb in the eye of all would-be insurrectionists. Jesus, King of the Jews. I want to talk more about this, but our time is passing. But next teaching segment. Is it this program or next program? Next program. Oh, this program, okay. Well, okay, good. I sometimes lose my way here. I'm just doing this live. So we'll take a break and I'll be right back. I'm here with Teresa Melilla at the Home of Mercy, which is an entire compound now that is a real miraculous transformation from what it used to be. And we're in front of a brand new building, Teresa, that has just recently been built.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about this.
This building is the main hall, and during the cold season, we had nowhere to meet. So this is now the hall that we meet in during the cold season, but also it's a dining room. It has a kitchen, and this is the serving area you see here. It opens up. So we've had training here, quite a bit of training for counselors, for the students in the Berean, the Bible study groups, but also people who come in home-based care. We did the training here for home-based care too. So people come in here and they can learn in here, but they can also sleep in here. Because it's a sleeping facility. At night, they can use the facility to sleep. It's got a kitchen, it's got a stores, and this is a serving area. But it's very airy, as you can see. It's got a lot of windows. So even in the hot season, we can still sit in there. But during the rainy season, we don't normally have a place because the rain comes into the other hall. So this is the perfect place for us. And even the children, when they come, the survivors, this is where we sit with them.
You mentioned the survivors. It's called the Home of Mercy for a reason.
Yeah.
We can maybe talk more about that in another segment, but you do have a number of little girls and young women who've been rescued from sexual abuse.
Yeah, about 66 right now.
So they're right adjacent to this building.
Yeah.
And they have access for feeding and all the other things you're talking about.
And we meet every Friday with them in the afternoons. Since they've started school, now we're going to be meeting on Saturday.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Thanks, Teresa.
You're welcome.
So, Jesus' blood was still drying on the hands of the soldiers as they cast lots beneath the cross for his seamless robe. You don't see any pictures of the crucifixion with an unclothed Jesus, but there were no clothing on victims who were crucified. In fact, they'd taken his seamless robe and they were now casting lots for it because they saw it was of great value, because it had no seam. To create something like this without a seam required remarkable expertise and a lot of time and really high quality material. There's no record as to how Jesus attained this remarkable garment. But anyway, they're casting lots for it. It's of great value. And the Roman soldiers who are casting lots were poorly paid. So if they could get this by casting some dice, let's do it. None of them probably would have read David's Psalm 22, verse 18, where he says, "They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." They were living in the heat of the moment, these Roman soldiers were, like you and I do. No regard for history, like most of us. Accountability for my actions, what's that? If I get away with it, I get away with it. I mean, isn't that modern morality? Well, at least one of them had a modicum of decency. He offered Jesus some wine mixed with an opiate to dull the pain. But Jesus refused it. Then the soldiers stayed by Pilate's order at the foot of the cross to deny access to any delusional disciple determined to take Jesus down before he died. So, the ensuing hours saw myriads of mockers spewing their hatred, including the pathetic insurgents crucified on either side of him. One wonders what it was that so energized all of these snarling wolves. Perhaps the prince of the power of the air, that would be Satan, was involved, totally focused on the events at Calvary. Remember, Satan is not omniscient. He didn't know the outcome. He just figured he had him. Just like the religious officials figured they had him. He'd failed in his attempts to derail Jesus time and again, but now he had him. He was about to kill him. And there was about to be a great victory celebration in the denizens of hell. A touch premature, mind you. There was this upcoming issue of an empty grave. But right now, it seemed that Satan had the upper hand. Jesus died. Look at verse 46. About 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Before I deal with that, Matthew tells us he was crucified at the 3rd hour, which is 9 a.m. The 6th hour is noon. The 9th hour is 3 p.m. Fear and consternation gripped the onlookers as the sun was darkened from noon to 3 p.m. I mean, this doesn't happen. Jesus hung, dying, in the darkness. And suddenly at 3 p.m., he utters this loud cry, a direct quote from Psalm 22, verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And he dies. Now, hang in with me here, because I've heard this discussion, this debate time and time again over the years, not only from congregants in various churches that I've pastored, but certainly many times in Jerusalem when I pastored there. And also in a lot of my television work, as I've been interviewing key Christian leaders in around Easter, they talk about this, and I've heard it all. This deep debate over why the Father would forsake the Son. Now, logic suggests that God could not forsake himself, and Jesus was fully God, right? Even as he was fully man. The usual comment that God could not bear to look on the imputed sins of mankind also lacks logic. Jesus took all the sin of mankind on himself. God can't bear to look. No, of course he can look. Right from Adam and Eve, to this very day, God is totally aware of sin. He looks omnisciently upon the sins of his creatures. The best explanation is that Jesus had been meditating on the messianic Psalm 22 while he hung there on the cross. We know that he had committed the scripture to heart. He's meditating on Psalm 20. You need to read all of Psalm 22. His loud cry was a declaration from Calvary that the Lord was victorious over the evil one. Indeed, in verse 31 of Psalm 22, he has done it. Okay? Satan and his small-time actors slunk away. The centurion's exclamation, truly this was the Son of God, ringing in their ears. But the point is, Jesus was quoting Psalm 22, meditating on Psalm 22, and he has done it, or it is finished, was the culmination of that meditation. God had not forsaken him. God cannot forsake himself. God looks on sin, always has looked on sin, always will look on sin until the end of days. But his Son bore the sin of mankind so that we would not have to be ushered out of God's presence eternally because of our sinfulness, but welcomed in because of the holiness of Christ within us. It's an amazing story of salvation. It's really salvation history is what we're dealing with here. So, let's pick it up in verse 57 here. I'll get there. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea called Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, placed it in his own new tomb that he'd cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene, the other Mary, were sitting there opposite the tomb. The next day, the one of after preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees went to Pilate. Sir, they said, we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he's been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first. Take a guard, Pilate answered. Go make the tomb as secure as you know how. So they went, made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard. Now, even though this Friday was the first day of Passover that year and a Sabbath in its own right, it was also the day of preparation for the weekly Sabbath the next day, which would begin, of course, Friday night at sundown. So Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, a secret follower of Jesus, asked for and received permission from Pilate to take Jesus down from the cross and to bury him in his own newly hand-hewn tomb. And it was and still is Jewish tradition to bury the dead on the day of their death. And Moses, had prescribed allowing a gibbeted body to remain hanging overnight. So gentle Joseph ritually defiled himself by taking Jesus' dead body down from the cross, wrapping it in yards of spice-packed burial cloths, and laying it in the place where he himself had intended to be entombed one day. While he did this, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, watched from a distance in the dusk. When we get to some of the other gospel accounts, we'll see that Nicodemus accompanied Joseph in this burial. It really is a touching scene. Both of these men were members of the Sanhedrin, that 71-member ruling council of Jerusalem, very wealthy, very highly regarded, high status, and they both risked everything and spent the rest of their lives ostracized because they touched this dead body on the Sabbath, took it down, wrapped him up kindly and gently, and buried him. They came out, if you will, as followers of Jesus. Remarkable courage, remarkable cost, a remarkable story. And the wonderful thing is when you go to Joseph's tomb today, and there are two sites, one's Protestant, one's Catholic, but the point is, the tomb is empty. He is not here. He is risen.
Wow! Working for Orphans and Widows has been caring for orphans and widows in Africa and India for over 20 years. Key to its vision is partnership with local champions who engage hundreds of church-based volunteers in home-based care. Care for the sick and the dying in their own humble homes. They are defenseless and afflicted. They are the least of these that Jesus would have us love and care for. Our partnered champions are based in South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, and India. They provide faithful, accountable, and godly care for thousands. Together with WOW, they truly are the hands and feet of Jesus to the sick and the dying. Founder and president Jim Cantelon has been committed to both teaching the gospel via Jim Cantelon Today TV and practicing the gospel through WOW. WOW is a proven ministry. We are grateful for your support. Call, write, or log on to wowmission.com and be inspired.
So there you have it, friends. We're going to refer briefly the next program to the resurrection and to its vital reality. But then we're going to wrap up the book of Matthew, and sometime in the next week or so, I should say the next several programs or so, we'll be able to get into the book of Mark. We're journeying through Matthew. We're almost ready for Mark. We'll do Mark, and then we'll do Luke, and then we'll do Acts, and then we'll do John. An adventure awaits. We have all the time in the world as the Lord tarries. I want to thank you so much for watching, and remember, friends, we're talking about Jesus here. This is not just some religious show. This is about bearing witness, testifying to the truth that God became man and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. Thank you for watching. See you next time.